Hello, and welcome once again to another Let's Play versus Impossible AIs. Today is, well, as the title suggests, EA Niefelheim. So, yeah, I was wanting to do another nation, but I kind of want to do something a little easier. Not really a ton of testing. As it's pretty... there's not many ways you can really play it overall. So, uh, that's the dry run I just finished, which hopefully we're not going to end up in the same type of game, because that was kind of annoying. Pretty easy, but overall annoying. National income, 4 water gems and 2 death gems is your national income. Outside of this, Niefelheim has a scale spread. So scale spreads are it will take a particular type of scale and it will actually push it outside of your dominion. So I'm just looking across where I have dominion here, and in the case of Niefelheim, it's your cold scales. How many ever cold scales is how much it will push out. So you can see we're up to 2 here, 2 here, 3, 1, 1. Well, that's a C, so it's only going to be 1 ever. 2, 2, 2, 1, etc., etc. 3, 3. So your cold scales actually push outside of your dominion border. So that will come into play later on, but that's something I need to mention right up front. Now, Nifflheim is a giant nation. When I say giant nation, I mean everything they have is a giant. You have no regular sized troops. Everything you literally have is a giant, size 4 or size 5. Giants have a handful of overall common traits. That being that they are very expensive. Even your very cheap militia are 20 gold. The resource costs are actually a little bit higher on giants overall because of their size. They don't really have better armor, but it does take more resources to make it overall. Some of their weapons, though, are particularly special for Jotun. Like here you have a Jotun spear. Regular spear's length 4, a Jotun spear's length 5. Here we've got a Jotun longsword. Longsword's length 2, Jotun longsword length 3. So since they are for the size of a giant, they're a little bit larger overall. They have generally above 30 hit points for giants. They are at least size 4, though, for giants as well. Strength's always going to be over 20. And yeah, that's, I guess I could say defense skill is a little bit deceptive for the numbers you see. Due to successive attacks in a given turn of combat. Each successive attack actually adds a -2 modifier. So if you're fighting like human-sized and they were attacking the scout, say, the first attack would be against 10 defense, but the second would be versus 8 defense, and the third would be versus 6 defense. Being that these are size 4 and you can only put 1 in a square, receiving multiple attacks is something that happens all the time. So, jumping in, Jotun Scout, 55 gold, 7 resources. Really, there's nothing more to say. 55 gold, even if it's sacred and does have a slightly lower upkeep overall, not worth it. Far too expensive for a scout. Yeah, if you have to, just burn some death gems and make up some black servants. Up next, we have the Jotun Hearse, 75 gold, 33 resources. Leadership value 60. Now, that's not enough to actually hit that 80 mark for the 3 squads plus 1 morale. Other than that, though, it is sacred. Honestly, I'm not a big fan of the hearse overall. I think you have better options as far as national leadership goes overall. So, speaking of that, we'll look at the first one, the Jotun Jarl, 130 gold, 33 resources, leadership value of 80. So this does have the plus 1 morale for up to 3 squads, and it is a priest level 1 and it is sacred. So I actually do kind of like the Jarls, just due to the way giant nations work. Because your troops are very expensive, you have to realize that even if your opponent is using very high quality troops, you're probably fighting 2 to 1 odds. If your opponent is using a lot of chaff and stuff like that, what you're going to find is you're fighting at least 3 to 1 odds, and sometimes, depending on what nation you're fighting and what they have access to, like it can be up to like 6 to 1. So you have to understand that giants don't really go in and just stomp stuff very fast. They kind of just outlast with their big size and extra hit points and things like that. So a little bit of extra morale to keep them in the fight, make sure that they're going to actually be able to grind it out to the end, is a pretty good option overall. So if you're going with like a non-blessed type build, these are pretty expensive, but many times I do feel the additional 1 morale here is well worth the extra price overall. After this, we have the Jotun Goat, 110 gold, 19 resources. Leadership value of 40 only, but we have a priest level 2 here. Now, if you happen to be using your sacreds, your Niffle Giants, they are size 5. So size 5, again, 1 per square. Blessing is a AoE 5. It's going to hit 5 squares, so up to 5 giants. But it also has an additional 5 AoE per additional holy level. And you can see we have a priest level 2, so being able to go from blessing 5 giants up to 10 on the priest level 2 here is overall a very worthwhile deal if you happen to be using your giants overall. Especially if you're going to just compare it to, like, say, the Jarl we just looked at. This guy's only going to be able to bless 5 giants a turn, while this one can bless up to 10. Again, the AoE is just going to be a little random, so sometimes you're not going to hit all 5 or all 10. But you get a lot more value if you happen to be using your Niffle Giants out of the goads. Alright, so that's it for normal commanders. We're into the mages now. Now, just like your troops, your mages are actually stupid expensive. You can see 255 and 225 gold, respectively. So, just upon this information alone, you should realize that you do have very high RP values on these giants. So they have a lot of research per one giant. But the overall cost effectiveness of either just the upfront purchase price or the upkeep is ridiculously high. In fact, it's unsustainable on a giant nation. You desperately want any type of indie that can give you any type of research. Lizards, Amazons, just the regular good researchers. So I did want to mention that up front. But up front we have the Jotun Scritari, 255 gold, 3 resources. It is slow to recruit, so you can only get one of these every other turn. Outside of this, though, it's a 2 water, 2 blood, along with a random of water, death, nature, or blood. So you are a blood nation. You're not a major blood nation. Now, you actually have guaranteed blood mages. Both of your non-cap mages are blood mages. The problem really is just the complete unsustainability of just buying them to even research, so buying them to have a bunch of blood hunters as well is something that's not feasible. So, whereas you actually can get a bunch of cap-only blood hunters out, or non-cap blood hunters, like a nation like Mictlan or Zabalba, which are major blood nations, the major difference is they have a bunch of very cheap blood 1 hunters that they can get all over the place, and you're not going to have that same ability. Your giants are just very expensive. So, in order to get those blood slaves, it's going to cost you a lot in gold, and it's going to take away from your RP, your research ability overall, which will hit ceilings definitely at certain points. Other than this, though, it does actually shape change into a werewolf overall. I guess I could mention, since you are a cold 3 nation, the nation loves Arctic temperatures and everything has a lot of cold resist on it. The overall pathing here, the death and the nature is not completely useless, but generally they're not very good. There's very limited uses that you can actually do with these overall. So, if you want to go with the blood side, crossbreeding's not terrible, but again, you have to pay a very high premium on those blood hunters to get them out, and that is taken away from your overall ability to research. So you're really not going to have slaves to throw at something like that, and likewise, Bone Fiend's not a great summon overall. There's definitely far better areas you could spend blood slaves. There are a few uses overall for some of these cross paths, but generally speaking, the death and nature versions are definitely not as good overall as, like, say, just a triple blood or a triple water version that you would pick up. Honestly, I really wish they would just cut the death out of this guy, and it would be pretty fantastic. I will say I like the Jotun Scritari a lot more. Now, it does have a upkeep cost of 204 gold compared to the next mage we'll look at, which is at 180 for the upkeep. This one is more expensive up front, and it is more expensive to pay upkeep on them. However, the Jotun Scritari is almost semi-spammable. It's just due to the slow to recruit nature of them. You're only having to shell out 255 gold every other turn. Uh, which, if you just look at it kind of on a turn-by-turn basis, you're having to shell out 127.5 gold towards a Scritari and having a fort output them all year round. Of course, you're only going to get 6 Scritari in a year compared to like 12 mages, but it's somewhat spammable for a giant mage. So I really do like that about them overall. Up next, we have the Gaija, 225 gold, 3 resources. This is a Death 1, Nature 1, Blood 1, along with a random of all the Sorcerer's Paths. So, and then on the backside, you have another 100% chance at all the Sorcerer's Paths again. The Gaija also comes with Old Age, and it's also got the Death Curse here. So, if you happen to be losing a mage, though, cursing something is not really all that big of a deal, especially when you've paid this much to just get the mage in the first place. It's not a good deal overall. The Gaija is actually a pretty good mage, just like the Scritari. Each one of them has different applications. The real problem with the Gaija is it's just a very random path spread here, meaning getting the mages that you want can sometimes be a little problematic. Not only that, but just fielding battle mages can be really expensive for a giant nation anyways. Again, any of them you put in the field for casters is really taken away from your RP, and there's only so many giants you can buy before you just cap out on how much gold you have. And that's still completely true about the Gaija. The other really big problem, though, is, like I said, the just completely random path spread here. Like, you're going to want a double Astral for some site searching, and you're going to want, like, a double Blood to eventually get Illwinter off. That's a particular spell. So you're going to need the double Blood in order to forge up some boosters. If you just do the math on it, say we need the double Blood, that's a 1 in 4 and a 1 in 4, so that's actually a 1 in 16. Should have triple Blood, which is what you need overall, triple Blood right here by both of those randoms being there. And if you just start doing the math, like 10 of them is 2,250, 15 would be another additional 1,125 gold, so you're now looking at not quite 3,500 gold, but not too far off of that mark either, which if you're just looking at just the pure numbers to get particular types of Gaijas that you want, it can become really, really expensive very quickly. So, yeah, that is definitely a problem, and that's why I kind of prefer the Gaijas in many regards, the Scritari to the Gaijas, is because spamming out 225 gold units is ridiculously unsustainable. Generally speaking, a couple forts you could probably spam out your cap-only Sacred Mage, along with either the Gaijas or the Scritari, but outside of that, you're really not going to be able to spam out any other mages and have any gold left for troops at all. Still, both of their mages definitely have uses overall. So now we have the cap-only. This is the Nifflheim. If you're playing Niefelheim, this is why you're playing it. It's 525 gold, 43 resources. It is slow to recruit. It's a 3 water, 2 death, 2 holy, along with a random of either air, water, or death. So the air, not terribly useful in and of itself. It does let you access flight in battle, so you can kind of jump into the back lines, jump into the archers, try to snipe up some mages or whatever. But overall, outside of that, you can't really cast anything with just air 1 that's of any use. The extra water, really, again, not really a ton of use. It's going to lower the fatigue a little bit to get your spell reel off, but it's not very intensive anyways. The triple death are actually pretty good. That allows, Soul Vortex and invulnerability spells like that. So, the hit point's 72, and these are a priest, and they are sacred, so they can bless themselves. Giants just scale really well with Nature 9 Blesses because they have a boatload of hit points overall. The Jarl is no exception here. The magic resistance is top of the line at 18, good morale at 15. Now, we come down here and we're just going to look. They are susceptible to fire, so any damage you take from fire sources, that damage is doubled up to whatever this number is here. So if you take, say, 4 fire damage, it's actually going to be 8, while if you take, say, 20 fire damage, it's only going to be 25. So it will double, but it can only max out for whatever this number is here. So you are a little weak to fire, both on the Jarl and your cap-only Sacreds as well. After that, cold resistance, they do have a chill 18 aura, so this will allow you to freeze units, which is a -3 attack, -3 defense, but on top of that, the chill aura will build up fatigue on units, especially those that do not have some sort of cold resistance already. Which, as they build up fatigue, it doesn't show it on the card as they build up, but that actually degrades your attack and defense skill, meaning they have a harder time killing these Jarls. Eventually they even pass out and stuff like that. So I didn't really mention the other stats. That's because of these next two things. We have cold power. So for every cold skill, you're going to gain 1 additional strength, 1 additional attack, and 1 additional defense. So if you have cold 3, it's 29 strength, 16, and 21. But there's also the flip side. If you happen to be in heat 3 skills, you're going to minus 3 out of all of these. So 23 strength, 10 attack, and 15 defense. So that's a little weird, but you also have the ice protection 3. For every cold skill you have, you're actually going to gain 3 natural protection. So that's in cold skill 3's 9 natural protection. 9 natural protection is not going to additively stack. Natural protection along with armor, there's a formula for it, but they don't additive, so it's not like you're going to jump up to 24. I believe it's 22 is what it is in cold 3. We'll look, that's why I bought this guy. So 22. But this really does have a, honestly, pretty good advantage. Now, these stats look a little higher because this guy's already got it experienced. And the reason it looks really good is they have this full leather armor right here. So they're not really eating any extra encumbrance or defensive penalty here for this very kind of cheap armor. And yet they can hit extremely high heavy armor levels. On the flip side, though, because they only have this full leather armor, in Heat 3 skills, this ice protection is going to knock you down to basically just having the full leather armor here. I believe you're in Heat 3, you have literally a body protection of 9, meaning you're pretty suicidal if you're attempting to use just a regular Jarl in that type of situation. You are extremely vulnerable with your Jarls to different temperature skills of your opponents, but also just the changing seasons in the game. You're always going to have an easier time during winter versus pretty much any opponent. Likewise, during the summer, you might not have as easy of a time. Nation that just happens to have neutral on the cold or heat scales, during the summer they're either going to have 1 or 2 heat, which is going to make your overall protection and stats just quite a bit weaker. But during the winter, you're actually going to be gaining a significant buff from these two abilities right here. And again, the full leather armor, just not a lot of defense and not a lot of encumbrance, so it's really nice in the cold, but in the heat, you kind of do see the effects of just having full leather armor here. Alright, so that's pretty much it on the Jarls. They are fantastic. SC them or Thug them if you just want to go with the brand and shield. That's perfectly fine. I would say they're the... Fomori is probably... I put their SCs a step above Jarls. I would probably say Jarls are the second best SC in the early age that you can recruit anyways. Probably Dione and then Hinnom's Rephiites, or however you say that. So, very, very, very strong unit. Very expensive, though. And now we're into the troops. So, I've never really broken the troops down like this, but generally your cap-only stuff is always over here on the full right. And this is not necessarily correct for every nation, but generally speaking, it always is. Over on the very left-hand side are your lowest tier troops, and right next to your cap-only stuff is your highest tier troops. Generally speaking, these have slightly higher stats than what your nation normally has. They're elite troops, while the ones on the far left generally actually have lower stats. The difference between the center is usually just various different types of gear and stuff like that. So this would be like, say, Tier 1, Jotun Militia, 20 gold, 17 resources. Really, all we have to do is see that this has 8 attack and 9 defense and realize that it is probably never going to kill 20 gold worth of troops. So it's not going to ever really pay for itself. Yeah, that's pretty much all we need to say on that, but we will see that this has a basic attack skill of 8 and a basic defense skill of 9. Along with a full leather armor. So up next we're moving to like Tier 2. So this is the Jotun Spearman, 30 gold, 17 resources. Now, This still has the full leather armor overall, but you'll notice that the basic skills, attack is 10 and defense is 10 as well. So pretty much better overall compared to the version we just looked at for only 10 additional gold. The body protection with the full leather armor is going to pop him up to 13 overall. Magic resistance and morale slightly above average, which is great because you're going to be tested, at least on the morale side. And losing giants to something like Soul Slay spam is really expensive but cost effective for your opponent. I think the Jotun Spearman is the best unit overall because generally the price tag is really, of your basic troops, this is the best anyways. Really comes down to the length 5 spear here, which means you're never going to get a repel check. You're always going to get those attacks off with these giants, number one. And number two, you're going to actually be able to repel many things. If you happen to be fighting spears, the way repel checks work is, just say I'm fighting 3 units with spears, doesn't matter what they are. The first attack, I will get a repel check against, so that unit has to roll a repel check just to be able to attack me. After you repel, though, it actually lowers the length of your weapon for just that round of combat, so then the next 2 spears will just be able to attack normally. But if you're fighting something with, say, longswords, which are length 2, the first will be against length 5 and it has to repel check. The second will be versus 4, has to repel check, and the third will be versus length 3 and have to still do a repel check. So the extra repel checks off of these length 5 spears can be quite handy. It's almost an extra layer of defense that many times you don't see because it really kind of runs in the background there. And the fact that they never have to deal with repel checks themselves means that you're always going to be able to kind of get those attacks through overall. Which is good because, again, you're going to be outnumbered. You're going to have to grind them down, which means actually getting attacks out. So the Jotun Spearman is probably my favorite of just your regular troops. Now, this is still like a tier 2 unit, 30 gold, 19 resources for the Jotun Javelins here. Basically, it's the complete same stat line, only we have a Jotun Axe, which means -1 defense. All axes give -1 defense, that's why it has a 11 versus 12 on the unit we just looked at. And it's got javelins. So javelins are strength, range equal to strength, but only 2 ammunition. Which giants are very strong, so you get a very long range javelin for 22 pierce damage. That's actually pretty dang good overall. The problem is they really only have those 2 attacks, and it's probably not generally worth it. Definitely more of a niche unit. It's definitely not worthless. The times when you'll need it, a bunch of just couple of ranged attacks to kind of get that damage in, not really all that often. It's kind of weird this does have a reinforced leather cap, while I believe the Spearman has the iron cap here. But definitely a niche unit. Boulder throwers, Jotun Hurler in this case, any boulder thrower is just absolutely useless. Strength divided by 3 for range means that it literally can throw out only a range 6. It's the problem of all the boulder throwers. The range just does not really pay for itself. And then you have to, those 2 ammo off of this would have to basically smash 2 units of very high value to actually pay for itself. Because once this thing wades into melee with an attack skill of 10 and defense skill of 5, these things are just going to get chewed up and spit out. Really, the Hurler's big selling point is like a siege bonus. The problem is, any nation that has boulder throwers of any type, they're giant nations. They already have giants access, and giants are ridiculously strong and tear down walls incredibly quickly, meaning this is pretty much a redundant and an unneeded bonus. I'd really like to see some sort of a siege bonus. I forget the actual name of it, where these defend a little bit better, maybe because they're throwing rocks at the people sieging your castles or something. Then they might have somewhat of a use, but they don't have that. This is worthless, just like all of them. In fact, I wouldn't even tier this, but here we're into like the tier 3, so we know that the armor has somewhat changed on these. And what you're going to have here is you've went from your full leather up to ringmail harbucks, so protection 9 up to protection 10. Really, you've just gone from total body protection of 13 to 14, from tier 2 to tier 3. So 35 gold, 23 resources for this Jotun Huskarl. Oh, it also has an additional morale. I guess I should mention that. Now this version's just got the axe. It's only link 3. It does add a -1 to defense, so pretty worthless overall compared to your other choices in the nation. Up next we have the Jotun Huskarl, 35 gold, 21 resources. So this is a spear version, much like the Jotun Spearman that we looked at just a little while ago. So the entire difference between the two, between your just regular Jotun Spearman, which I think is the best unit in the nation, and your Huskarl, is a difference of 5 gold and 4 resources, and what you gain for that is 1 additional body protection and a additional morale. Now, I personally would rather go with the cheaper option in pretty much every scenario, but I could easily see a player making a case where they said, no, 5 gold and 4 resources is not a lot, and these are a lot of extra, they're not a lot of extra stats for such a minor amount of gold, but they are staying power stats, which is something that the nation really kind of hinges on anyways as giants. So I would say this is certainly the second best unit, and I could easily see a player making a argument that this is the top unit that you have out of your non-cap only stuff. After this, we have your tier 4, basically. So this is like a Jotun Herdman, 40 gold, 33 resources. Again, you can see that the attack is up to 11 and the defense is up to 11 for just the base. Outside of that, though, this has a scale mail Harbux, so it actually goes up to a body protection of 16. And because it has the longsword as well as the additional just 1 base on the defense, it actually has a defense value of 14 compared to like the 12 of the Spearman we've been looking at, or the 11 of either of the Axe versions. Now, I actually really like the Herdman a lot. I think the additional protection here, you're really crawling to the very top end of like medium infantry to the bottom end of heavy infantry at this point. I think this is a great number overall. The whole problem is 33 resources. That is very expensive. Just for reference here, if you wanted to recruit 10 of these a turn, you need to have a fort that is able to turn out 330 resources a turn. That is generally like a cap with production 3 skills that also happens to have a good group of a good set of for its cap ring. 330 resources is a massive amount. So just for reference, these are actually quite a bit more expensive in gold, but if you're looking at resources, which should generally be the more limiting factor in your overall recruitment, at 17 resources, I can buy 2 of these at 34 resources versus 1 of these at 33. And I would rather take the double spearman versus a single herdman. And it's not that this is a bad unit. I actually really like them. It's just the overall ability to really mass them, to have them be a significant part of your army to kind of strategize around, is really not that good. So, after that, we're into your cap-only stuff. Nifflheim Giant, 155 gold, 23 resources. This is the reason new players are told, just go Nature 9 and play Niefelheim when you learn the game. It's pretty plug-and-play, pretty basic. They are sacred. They scale really well with Nature 9. Now, just like the Jarls, though, these are a size 5 giant, not a size 4. Protection, again, 14, but that is going to vary a lot due to the ice protection. Now, these only have ice protection 2, whereas the Jarls have 3. So I believe you're in Cold 3, you have 19 armor overall. But again, in like Heat 3, you're going to be dealing with 9 base armor for the body. Very good magic resistance at 15, and considering the price, and if they were really vulnerable to things like Soul Slay, that would be a massive problem. So it's good they've got that. Morale's pretty good at 14. Good strength for a giant. Slightly above average attack skill, slightly above average defense skill, but again, kind of the asterisk next to the defense skill, because it's a little wonky due to the giant. But these also, again, have cold power 1. So these are going to be much more effective in the cold climates, and really not nearly as effective in Heat 3. And it will vary overall. So if you're using your giants or you're using your jarls, you just have to understand there's ways around it, but just the general rule of thumb is Heat 3 is suicide. Heat 2 is suicide. Heat 1 is really problematic. Cold 3 is ridiculously strong. Cold 2 is ridiculously strong, and Cold 1, you're pretty strong. I mean, that's just rule of thumb overall. There are some ways to scooch around the heat problems overall. But yeah, very expensive, but very simple to use, and that's a reason a lot of players kind of gravitate towards the giant nations. Is it's very simple to wrap your head around. After that, we have the cap-only Jotun skin shifters. So 80 gold, 5 resources. Now limited recruitment. You can only buy 5 of these a turn. Hit points are 35. They do regenerate 10% per turn. Their protection is a body protection of 11 since they only have the furs down here. The magic resistance of 14, so very good. Morale of 15, very, very good. Just slightly above average strength in terms of a giant, slightly above average attack skill, and defense skill actually kind of low for a giant. But these do come with the Jotun spears, so length 5 weapon as well. And as well, when these actually die, they have a wound shape, much like Yomi's Onis. When these die, they actually will shape change into a werewolf with, I forget, 45, 48 hit points, something like that on the backside. They're going to have 2 length 0 attacks, a bite and a claw. I believe their defense goes up to 11 or 12. So there's actually a lot more value than what you're seeing here in just the base level, because it does have that second shape. And after the battle, it just transforms back into this giant, and it clears all of its afflictions. So I love skin shifters. I love them a lot. But I have a overall problem with trying to really build them into a overall game plan. The reason being, they have the double whammy on recruitment. They are cap only, and they are limited recruitment. Um, just for reference, you should always be taking at least Dom 6 unless you have a particular reason you're going lower. So just for reference, I'm going to be able to recruit 6 of these giants at the start of the game, no matter what, and at no point during the game am I ever going to be able to recruit 6 skin shifters. Um, so losing a stack of Jotun skin shifters is actually more problematic than losing a group of any cap-only sacred on most nations in the game. You can replace cap-only sacreds faster than you can replace skin shifters, which is, I think, an overall pretty big problem with them. And that's not to say they're not fantastic and they can be great during the expansion phases. But if you ever lose a stack of them, that's pretty much like the end of what you can do with the skin shifters. It just makes them hard to mass and therefore hard to game plan around. Really, it's essentially the same problem I just talked about with the Herdman. I really like both of these units. I would really like to use them more. The problem is, well, what am I really going to do? Last game I did actually do a pretty big skin shifter for my dry run, though. So, national spells, Sloth of Bears. Nature 2, and you're going to get 10 bears, plus 2 for every additional level of your caster. If you happen to go with that Nature 9 Bless, you're going to get 24 bears for 10 gems, or 2.4 bears per gem. That's actually a pretty good deal. The bears are not fantastic over in and of themselves, but 2.4 bears per gem is actually a pretty decent deal. The overall problem is that this nation has no national nature income, and it chews through nature gems. There are many, many better things that you can put gems towards. So, yeah, not really all that effective of a spell. Up next, we have the Awakened Drugar. I mean, who hasn't played Skyrim? I'm sure everybody knows what a Drugar is by this point. So, number of effects 3, death gems 12, so that's 4 death gems per. Now, these are going to do Undead Vans. They are a... they do have a chill aura, and they do have a fear aura as well. And fear auras on units is an incredibly strong thing. Fear auras themselves, the number behind them just means how big they are, the size of the battlefield they affect. Like a fear 5 and a fear 20, they literally do the same amount to the enemy's morale, just the fear 20 hits a lot more units. You can actually stack multiple fear units, though, and get multiple effects. So if I have like 6 units on the battlefield with fear, my opponent is really fighting a lot of fear in particular parts of the battlefield, and is very likely to break and rout, which makes any units with fear actually pretty good overall. That's one of the reasons like Chaos Knights and Ghosts can be honestly pretty dang good. I personally do not care for the Drugar on this nation, though. It has to do with their overall size when they start out, because they filter right up to the front line and get smashed pretty easy. So I don't think they're very effective for this nation, but it just has to do with being able to embed them behind your lines, which is not really possible with them. After this, we have the Brood of Garm, 2 nature to go ahead and cast it, 5 effects, 10 gems, so 1 per 2 gems. So you're going to summon huge wolves. These are size 4 wolves. They are giant wolves. They are sacred, though, so they can take your bless, and they have Berserk on them. So they're going to fight to the bitter end once wounded. I outside of my area of knowledge, because I don't do multiplayer, I assume this is a pretty good rating tool in multiplayer. As far as single player, you're going to have to really use them as armies because the AIs just get too many province defense up. And I found these to be far weaker than what they look like on paper. Now, once I actually, well, I think I made about 200 gems worth of them, and I just made a few giants and sent them out. And after, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6 battles, something like that, all my wolves were dead in both armies. And so I kind of went back to the drawing board and just kept working with them and working with various alteration spells to get some force multipliers off on them. And then I really started to get a lot of value out of them at that point. But they actually are quite a bit weaker on paper than what they actually appear to be in the game, which was a little odd for me because I really thought they were going to be quite good in and of themselves since they had that bless. The last spell you're going to have, Illwinter, just like the name of the company. So it's a global enchantment, 1 effect, 120 Blood Slaves. Again, Blood Slaves, very expensive to get as this nation overall. So this is going to have 3 effects. One is the world's going to be draped in cold 3 scales. Seas and deep seas, again, they can't quite shift to cold 3, but everywhere in the world's going to attempt to try to shift to cold 3 scales. So that is really good. You no longer have to worry about your Jarls fighting in neutral or any type of heat. Everything's cold 3 at that point. The second thing is there's going to be some independent attacks, so they don't come out from you. You don't have to worry about going to war with anybody. It's going to be some Niffle giants, Niffle shamans, werewolves, dire wolves, regular wolves. They're not really all that effective. The AI, again, has usually far too much province defense for them to really do all that much. And the third effect is going to be increase in unrest anywhere that you do not control in the world. So that's really going to pull down the number of resources that your opponents have, as well as the amount of gold that they're getting as that unrest begins to build up. So Illwinter itself can be a great spell. Do not misunderstand me, but I really think Illwinter is a win more spell. Now, this is not entirely true. There are times where you really want to get Illwinter off, but generally speaking, Illwinter is literally your. If you've gotten this far and progressed this far into the game, you're probably already winning it, and this just helps you win more, win faster. It's not really going to tilt the game in your favor, because by the time you actually get down here to like Blood 6 to go ahead and get this, and you have managed to get that Gaija in order to forge up some boosters, you're looking at 20 for the Bloodthorn, you're looking at another 15 for a Armor of Twisting Thorns. You're also looking at a couple of Sanguine Dowsing Rods. What is that, like 165 Blood Slaves, plus coming all the way down into Blood 6? That's not cheap. None of that is cheap for this nation. So I really... There is a time when Illwinter is not a win more spell. I literally just got done with a game, my dry run. It was 2 Heat Nations and 2 Water Nations. And both of the Water Nations actually took Heat 3 as well. So I literally was playing against 4 nations, all with Heat 3 scales. Which is really weird, because Therados was actually one of the Water Nations, and I thought they always went with Cold 3 because of the ghosts and their resistance to the cold. I was very confused. It's not hard to miss, though, when you notice that an opponent has triple death, triple misfortune, triple turmoil, triple heat. Yeah, it's obviously that those are Theranos' skells, because they are a pop kill nation. It's real easy to notice pretty quick. I was just very surprised. I had never seen a pop kill nation not go with triple cold skells before. But this was very handy. I mean, there are ways you can work around the heat scales overall, but it can be a little difficult. Generally, your research is going to be getting your Jarls online. So Construction 4, that's going to be your Vine Shields and your Frostbrands. And then you're going to want to jaunt down here to Alteration 4. That's going to be Quick and Self, a little bit more defense, a lot more AP, and you get to attack twice per turn. And then you're going to come down here for Liquid Body. So mundane attacks gain reduction. So Pierce, Blunt, and Slash resistance, 50% of those damage types. Just ignore it. So very, very good spell overall. And you don't have to get a huge spell reel, and they're not very fatigue draining on your giants. So they actually are not too high on the fatigue level once you get to that point. I will say, though, again, going back to your mages being very, very expensive, what you're going to find is at certain points in the game, you are just going to plateau on the amount of mages you have. And it's not uncommon. I will probably plateau at around 400 RP. Now, that's not a ton of RP overall for a game. But that's about where I'll plateau out for a 5-player game like I'm going to do 4 AIs myself. Just because that's how much gold's going to be in the game, how much territory I can actually put towards that. So if you're looking at like 400 even in a late game scenario, that is not a lot of RP, which means you have to be razor focused in what you research. I'm not telling you that you have to go any particular route, but once you start a game, maybe look at your opponents, but after that you have to have a very clear idea of this is exactly what I am going to be doing research-wise, because you cannot change your research on the turn of a dime. You cannot focus multiple deep trees as far as research goes. Going to like level 6 in research is very deep for what you'll be able to afford. Short of getting 2 or 3 very good indie provinces, which I actually have had happen, but don't plan on that. That's pretty lucky actually on my part. Alright, other than that, we got one more thing I'm just going to look at, because we've talked about the size 4 units, right? And I've just set up a little scenario here with some militia. And what you're going to notice is I've got a battle here, which we're going to take a peek at. And we're going to discuss how size works in this game. So each square, everywhere where that little square is, can hold up to 6 size worth of units. That's why size 1 units are 6 per square. Humans, size 2, are 3 per square. Things like Kaylee and Magartha are size 3, but only 2 per square. And why giants can only be 1 per square, because they're size 4 right out the gate. What you'll notice, though, is if you use giants, you actually have room for a size 2 human-sized troop. Obviously, never use militia for something like this, but you can embed different types of units in with your giants, which can make the overall strength of them a lot better. So when I say I do not like the Drugar because they filter into the front of the line, what I mean is they literally just walk through no matter how many giants I have and end up on the front line and die very fast. It's not like a human-sized nation where if I put them behind a wall of troops, the wall of troops in front of them have to die before they really get into a situation where they have to fight. That's actually not how the Drugar function here. If you really want to try to go with a heavy scale build, you might really think about maybe pushing for like Conjuration 6. At that point you have Ghost, which I believe is 5 ghosts for 14 gems, so what is that? It's under 3. I don't know, 2.7, 2.8 gems per ghost. Now those also have fear, but they also have that ethereal. So while they'll filter to the front, 75% of the attacks will miss against them. It's just a better option, and there's a lot of different options in what you can filter in through these spots. But you just have to be aware that that is something you can do to really make your giants a lot better. what are the heroes? I guess we can talk about that. Base game, 2 heroes. What are the heroes adds an additional 1 hero. So what you have... Well, I actually do have that turned all the way down. Okay. You have the Great Hag. It's basically a really good Gaija with all the paths. It's going to have 3 blood. It's going to have 2 astral. I forget, 2 or 3 death and 2 or 3 nature. So that's pretty fantastic. You no longer have to dig for Gaijas. It can do all of your gear forging, a lot of your site searching. It's a really good Gaija to get because you don't have to spend many thousands of gold trying to dig for a particular version for anything. So that's really, really nice to have. The Hag, Great Hag, I forget exactly what her name is. Then there's a version that is the Abductor, something the Abductor. He's basically a Niefelheim, but he comes with 3 air. And he has the ability to shape change. When he shape changes, he loses his head slot, but he gains 1 additional air, but loses 1 from each of his other paths. However, this gives you a 4 air mage. With the 4 air mage, you're able to actually forge winged helms. Winged helms give an additional air to air mages, and what do you know? You actually, 33% of your giants are air 1 right out the gate. If you can actually turn those into air 2 for 20 air gems, that is very, 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 I mean, ridiculously good. It lets you access Mistform, which is great in and of itself, but honestly, once you have access to that, you can really jump into Thaumaturgy, and you come down here to Enchantment 4, and you're going to be able to access Cloud Trapeze. Being able to move your giants around during the magic phase for catching any type of army or just jumping behind armies, that is really, really strong. I mean, ridiculously so. So the Abductor is fantastic. Now, I think Worthy Heroes is actually a negative for this nation, because the Abductor is just stupid powerful, and the Hag is really, really convenient. The hero it adds in the game is actually the Huntress, Great Huntress, something like that. It's the Abductor's daughter. And she is 3 water, 2 nature. She's a big giant, but she's sacred and stealthy. She has no priest level, so she actually can't bless herself, which is a big downside right out the gate, because she's not nearly as effective of an SC. Her paths don't really bring anything new to the nation overall. But the worst problem about it is you really, really want the Abductor, or you really, really want the Hag. Which means if you get a hero and she's the one that pops up, you actually didn't get one of the 2 heroes that you really wanted. So I do think that Worthy Heroes is a bit of a downside for this nation. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay. It's funny because generally speaking, Worthy Heroes increases the power of heroes in general for nations. It's just funny that it actually is a negative for this nation. So, particular pretender chases is Irmisil. Any nation that has it is fantastic. Nature 9 may not always be the optimal bless for any nation that you take, but it is always the best generalist bless for any nation you can take. And being that he costs 180, has Nature 3 right out the gate as well as Dominion 4, means that this is just the best Nature 9 chasis in the game. Honestly, I think it's a little too cost effective in my opinion, and not by much. Sometimes when things are a little too cost effective, dragons, they literally like neutered them. I mean, dragons got way overpriced for what they used to be. So, outside that, I would call out the Son of Fenrir as being a pretty decent option if you're wanting to go for an Awake Expander. I really like him. Very, very low cost. The paths are not terrible. Comes with a built-in Fear 10, and the Berserk 7 means this guy jumps up to 20 body armor once he's been hit. If you can go ahead and get him to cast some regeneration, personal regeneration or something later in the game. It's also stealthy, so you can kind of stealth him around. I just really like this as a Awake Expander overall. Probably nothing I'd use on this nation, but if you really want to go with an Awake Expander, the Son of Fenrir is never a bad option. So, we're going to go with Irmisil. Here's your basic Giant Bless for any nation. Nature 9, Earth 4. Now again, you're very, very high on the cost. You're definitely going to want your Order 3. You're pretty high on your productivity. You can probably get away with 1 on most of the maps, but I'd probably go with 2 just to be safe. And I'd probably bump the growth up to something like that overall. So, oh, and you want Dom 6. So actually what you find is you're actually a few scales short here overall. So you would have to do something like Misfortune 2, which there's actually a lot more bad events in Misfortune 2. It used to be the go-to dump scale like temp scales are these days, which is kind of inconvenient for a nation that could really use a good dump scale. This nation's not able to dump its temp scale like most nations would. I would not suggest Misfortune 2. A lot of players on the nation like to go with the Drain 2. You have the extremely high RP values on your Giants, and you just pay for the Bless like that overall. I think Drain Scales are the worst scales in the game, and being that you desperately want some good researchers, some independent researchers that are not part of your nation, this really will hamper them at -2 RP. It doesn't really affect your Giants terribly, who are already terribly inefficient in and of themselves, but at least have those very high values. I personally do not agree with the Earth 4 here. I don't think it's a good deal. I think you can grab up all of the guaranteed skills as far as money goes. So you're at plus 30% income, plus 45% resources, and you're growing by 0.6% each turn. So not 1%, but 0.6%. You also have Dom 7, so your Dom's just a little bit higher. You have that more that better Dominion control overall. I mean, I just think this is far superior. If I end up in a game where I really want to utilize my Giants, I want to rush somebody just due to my opponent lineup, I can do that. If I jump into a game and there happens to be 3 more Heat Nations like my dry run I just did, I can actually completely flip this and just really try to scale the game out and utilize skin shifters and my spearmen and stuff like that. I'm actually going to alter this 1 more. I'm going to take away 1 in growth, and I'm actually going to bump my Dom up to 8. So this build right here does not excel at anything. This is not the best scales you can get. I can take something like the Frostfather down here, and I can get better scales. Imprison him, I can get the Luck 3 and Magic 1, but I'm stuck at Dom 6, and I don't have a Major Bless, especially the Nature 9 for my Jarls. So that's a pretty big loss of effectiveness. At the same time, I can get the Nature 9 Earth 4. The reinvigoration is great, but really the big selling point for me for the Earth Magic is Dwarven Hammers. You will chew through nature gems at an incredible rate as this nation, and having Dwarven Hammer access is very, very good overall. What I like about this build, though, that I have really come to like is it doesn't excel at the Bless, it doesn't excel at the Scales, in fact, it doesn't even excel at the Dom. It is not the very top end that I could get for any of these categories, but it is ridiculously strong in all 3 categories, which is why I like it. It really gives me a lot of wiggle room to decide what I want to use on this nation and where I'm going to go with it overall. So, Tree Bark, Oak Strong, okay. So we're going to set that to common. 2 points per player, 2/3 victory condition. So that's pretty standard when I play my games. Disabled, disabled. Looks good. Alright, and we're just going to take a quick peek and... Those Kalium, Mictlan, and Acro. Well, Mictlan's a Heat Nation. I'm pretty sure it's been a while since I played Baratos, but I'm pretty sure because of where they're based off of that they're a Heat Nation. Kalium's a Cold Nation, and Acro's just neutral, so they could be anything. In other words, my chances of being able to rush somebody, 2 of these opponents are definitely out right out the gate. So, Giants probably maybe not the best pick. I don't know, I'll probably go have a cigarette after this video and think about it for a moment. Anyways, enough blathering from me. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed, and until next time.